watching The Producer's Room, a streaming web series featuring the creators behind the hit songs of today's music industry. Songwriters, music producers, and artists discuss their creative process as well as examining current issues and technologies in today's rapidly changing music business. Your host is producer, songwriter, and educator Dave Tuff. Welcome to The Producer's Room.
Hey guys, Dave, just grooving out here on a Sunday afternoon, like Marvin Gaye said. And today's tune on Dave's Waves really grooves hard. It's called Let's Dance by another David Bowie. And once again, we appreciate you guys watching every episode of Dave's Waves where we talk about the instrumentation and production of the song. Anyway, Let's Dance is a 1983 mega hit co-produced by Nile Rodgers, and we'll talk about it now. Hope you guys dig it. Welcome to this episode of Dave's Waves where we're going to talk about Let's Dance by David Bowie, co-produced by Nile Rodgers. And before anything, let's go ahead and listen to it, and then we'll start talking about it. All right, we'll stop it there. So many things to already talk about on this song. First thing let's talk about is the hook itself. Let's Dance. Obviously, it's an invitation to the listener. We've talked about that before. An invitation to the listener to draw them in. It's a we song. Let's dance, all of us together. And then you'll notice the bridge actually speaks to the listener specifically. If you say run, I'll run with you. And it's no accident there's a lot of repetition. If you say run, I'll run with you. Or let's dance, let's sway. And actually, if you listen to the lyrics, it's even a call and response, taking it back to even early spirituals, where let's dance, response, let's dance. Let's listen to that real quick. Response. Put on your red shoes and dance the blues. And then another response. So there's actually three responses there. There's a let's dance, and there's Bowie's response, and then there's the horn echo of what he does, which is really cool. So three responses there lyrically, but the song doesn't necessarily start right with the hook. It starts with what I call the Beatles type of twist and shout build up there. Scale degrees 1, 3, 5, flat 7, dominant 7th chord with the ahs on the vocals. And to me, that's a Nile Rodgers technique that he had used before in his band Chic with Bernard Edwards, the late Bernard Edwards. Nile's obviously still with us, and if you listen to the one song that comes to my mind is Good Times by Chic. Once again, it starts kind of with a piano glissando or a reverse piano there at the beginning of the song, which obviously then influenced Queen with Another One Bites the Dust with their reverse piano as well in that song. But it has a little piano gliss that captures the listener's attention right away, and that's really important with radio. I think this song was number one on both sides of the ocean. I think it went to number one in '83 in England and in the States. So let's check out that build-up real quick at the beginning, the Beatles-type build-up that catches your attention. So right there, already the listener's drawn in, and then Niall gets him right into the groove. So let's talk about the groove for a minute, because the groove is such an essential part of this song. So first off, you'll notice, I mean, there are stems here, but really the biggest stem is guitar and horns combined together. But you'll notice a pretty sparse instrumentation, but the song itself sounds really, really big. And once again, when I think of Nile Rodgers' production, it's kind of a theme that he has in his production, that every part sounds really big. It's not that many parts. It's not like 100 plus tracks like we have on some radio songs today, but it might be 20 or 30 parts, but they all sound huge. So speaking of a huge sound, they cut this in the Power Station, and Tony Bongiovanni, which if Bongiovanni, don't know exactly how to pronounce it in Italian, but that name sounds familiar. Bon Jovi, he was Bon Jovi's uncle, and he owned the Power Station, and it had a nice big room. And the first thing they did with that room, or at least guys with like Bob Clearmountain, was not invented, I should say, because Phil Collins actually did that first on one of his records, the gated snare sound. But the Power Station was a great room for that gated snare sound. So let's actually listen to that real quick. So the range of the gate doesn't close all the way, but you'll notice it takes the room verb and it just gates that reverb from the room mics off. So we still get the attack and the bigness of the snare. And we got some delay on it there, some stereo delays, which is also a theme of this song. Right? So that in itself is a cool technique to make the snare sound huge. And then let's go ahead and add the kick. Let's see what they did with that. Which I think is funny when I listen to this, because the kick is flamming. It's almost like two kicks together, but I never noticed that when I actually listened to the song. So today we probably shy away from that because it muddies up the low end, but it doesn't seem to hurt the song in any way. I don't think that's a slap. I think it's actually two kicks hitting, which is interesting. I'm just curious why they did that, but let's go ahead and add in the snare. Cymbals. Kind of gives it that top end. But you notice Omar Hakim here is playing real simple quarter notes, right? Except for some occasional sixteenths on the bass drum. But that groove in itself holds the song together. And then the coolest part is that since it's such a simple groove, it leaves some space for the woodblocks here, played by Sammy Figueroa, I guess. And what they did with the woodblocks, once again, speaking to that stereo delay technique, I'm not sure what device they were using at the time. It's 83, so they probably had digital delay at that point in time. But stereo delay on the woodblocks as well, which to me is such a signature part of this song. Let's go ahead and turn those up just a hair so we can hear them, and here we go. So they're kept kind of mono-ish at the very beginning, and then it goes wider as they play that part. It goes wider stereo, wider and wider, which is really cool in itself. So that groove is the basis of the song. Now, from what I've read on this particular song, Carmine Rojas played the bass, and when he first approached the bass part, he was going pretty busy, like a Jocko, type of record, and Niall kind of reined him back and said, "Hey, man, it's not your record; it's David's record," which is a good attribute for a producer to have, is to realize when a part is too busy and it doesn't contribute. So him and Niall sat down supposedly and kind of worked out this bass line. The cool thing about the bass line I want you to notice, and it's something that Chic did as well, and David Bowie, is doubled the bass line with a synth. In fact, let's go ahead and listen to the bass line itself for a moment. So another cool thing about the bass line, and we talked about this last time in the Coldplay song, is that it uses the exact same 2-bar, which is funny. a repeating pattern here, repeating motif between two songs 20 years apart. But it uses downbeats on the first half or the first bar of the music, don't, boom, boom, boom. And then the second bar is all syncopated, I would say more offbeat than onbeat. So boom, 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 boom. Second bar, dum, ba-dum, bum, bum. So real syncopated. And that is a real catchy way to do it, right? So a lot of syncopation there, but still cool. You know, if you, once again, a chic technique. If you listen to Good Times, the song Good Times, once again, they had the exact same thing going on. The first bar was all down notes for the bass guitar. Bum, 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 ba dum, bum, 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 ba da dum, dun, dun, bum, ba da bum, 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 ba dum, right? So exact same thing Niall is using here. Different notes, obviously. This is in the key of A flat, and that was in the key of E, but same idea with the bass rhythm. So that's crucial there. Okay, so if it was just that, it would be a pretty grooving song, right? With all the things going on. So everything except for the wood block is pretty dead and dry. So you get that contrast between wet and dry already just in the rhythm section. Another thing about this song, which is interesting, it's all acoustic instruments, right? Real players, but they're all processed to make them sound kind of artificial, which is probably a 1983 thing, you know, all the digital effects that came on board around 1983. And also the CD was invented in 1983 by Sony, or CD format. So we're in a digital world here, but over-processed, or at least processed acoustic instruments that start to sound almost like MIDI instruments, because MIDI came the year before in 1982. All right, so let's go ahead and check out the guitar and horn parts. And like I said, the horns are kind of an echo in themselves. I'll go ahead and leave all these instruments in, turn down the wood blocks just a hair. We'll turn up the horns. The guitar didn't come in till later, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Okay, yet another rhythmic thing to pay attention to on this groove, at least the verse groove or the chorus groove, whatever you want to call it, is that the horns are doing their syncopated parts rhythmically when the bass is holding down the quarter notes. So there's never a part where the bass is syncopated and real, jumpy, and the horns are real syncopated and jumpy. Every time the horns play their part, they're under, once again, the quarter note bass line, and then it leaves space there for the bass line to do its funkiness in those little holes. Okay, starting to hear the guitar coming more there. So that's Stevie Ray Vaughan, and you all know Stevie Ray Vaughan from blues, but the story is that David Bowie saw him at a jazz festival and in 1982 and took a mental note and said, this guy might be good to contribute to a track. And what I've read is Niall was a little wary of him being on the track, but it really seemed to work out at the end because it was kind of a blues rock thing against a dance format. So one of David's goals for this particular record, I think, when he first started out with Niall, is to incorporate several different genres, and I think they were effective there because it's kind of rock, it's kind of blues, and it's definitely dance. So Stevie Ray Vaughan there with some stereo delays to keep adding to our stereo delays that we already have on the wood blocks and somewhat on the snare. Obviously a time delay. But even on the guitar parts, you'll hear that all these three things lock together that have delays on them. The snare, the wood blocks, and the guitar, they're not stepping on each other. So let's go to the bridge and see what the horns and the guitars do. We got our twist and shout build up again. Okay, so the cool thing about that, at least the bridge, once again, we're talking about contrast in arrangement and production. So you'll notice that I guess we could call the chorus or the first part of the groove very staccato in all the parts, very short. And then we go more legato on the second half, the bridge, or the B section, where all the instruments are a little longer in their parts. And then the interesting thing is the snare drum takes up the syncopation with more delay on it in the bridge. Everything's legato, snare drum has the delay on it now. I think we have some organ in there, some light organ as well. And later on we got some solo action. Let's see, where are we? I gotta find it, but... So definitely different remixes on this song. I think this was probably a little longer than the actual radio remix, so I'm trying to find the lead. There we go. Let's listen to our Stevie Ray lead real quick. So what I find fascinating about the lead is really for the first 8 bars, he's really just playing one note, kind of like an Albert King kind of approach, but he owns that one note, which once again speaks to something not being so busy, but filling it up. And if you listen to just the guitar part itself, once again, listen how much the guitar just fills that up by itself. Really just focusing around that one note, just bends and cool slides and things like that Stevie did on that, a little bit of slapback on that particular part. All right, let's go ahead and revisit the vocal here, talk about it. So once again, like I said, the vocal is a call and response. Let's dance, let's dance, let's sway, let's sway. Several call and responses there, inviting the listener in, and if you say run on the bridge, talking directly to the listener. But let's listen to the actual processing of the vocal.
Let's dance.
Okay, some background singers there.
Put on your red shoes and dance the blues.
Once again, going back to our Coldplay, it's just interesting that these things come around. The Coldplay almost used the exact same effects, where it was a longer verb on the vocal. So to me, this is the longest verb in the song itself on the vocal. So we have verb and delay on the vocal, David's lead vocal here. Let's see, I'm on grid, aren't I? Yeah, there we go. Go ahead and slip it and get right there.
Let's dance to the song they're playing on the radio. Let's sway while color lights up your face.
Another thing interesting wise, mix wise at least, is that this particular delay on the vocal is not timed like the other. It's not rhythmically timed like the other delay. So I don't know if there's a timing to it. It's a dotted eighth or anything like that, but it actually doesn't have the timing, which actually probably helps it stand out more in the track than if it would have had the exact same rhythmic delay.
To the song they're playing on the radio. Let's sway while color lights up your face. Let's sway. Sway through the crowd to an empty space. If you say run, I'll run with you. And if you say hide, we'll hide.
Nice little background parts there.
My love for you would break my heart in two. If you should fall into my arms, tremble like a flower.
Good performance by Bowie there. A few things which is interesting EQ-wise as well is that Bowie's vocal still has that low end to it, and then probably makes it stand out more. While the BGVs, the background vocals, are a little bit thinner, obviously. And if you think everything's bright on this recording, it's no accident, because I think Niall went for that, or Niall and David went for that. They really wanted to stand out on radio and make it bright to compete with all the other records. Even though the CD had come out this year, people were still primarily playing records at that particular time, and adding high end to it would definitely make it stand out from other cuts on the radio. One thing harmonically that we should move on to is you'll notice that all the verses are in key of B flat minor, and they kind of stay on that B flat minor. But then when the bridge comes, it's kind of like a happier chord progression, if you want to put it that way, a little happier modulation. So groove it on one chord, and then when we get to the B section, it starts to change chords, which actually lifts the harmonic structure of the song. Let's see. Another thing that I find fascinating, well, a couple other things, is that if it was a hit today, we'd probably start with the build-up and go right into the chorus. But they gave it 8 bars to groove there, and that was probably a sign of the radio format at that particular time, that they gave it a little bit of space to groove. But nowadays it would go right from the ah to let's dance, because I think the listener's attention span even today has gotten a little bit shorter. From my research, at least, I think 30% of the Billboard, and my studies show that 30% of the Billboard hits of top 100 hits of 2012, 2013 used no intro, so they went straight into the song. So just shows you a little bit different how we might produce it today. The other thing that I would just in general talk about is the horn parts, and I think, I'm not sure, I think Niall probably arranged the horn parts, but Barry sax, and so they were trying to get that old school R&B, perhaps even Stax Memphis sound in the arrangement of the song. Like I said, this went to number 1 on both sides of the charts. Few instruments, but it makes it sound still huge in its sound because of the contrast and the reverbs, the delays, the gated snare, all of that. Niall actually heard the demo, from what my reading, as a folk song. David Bowie played it to him on a guitar, acoustic guitar, and it was a folk song. But David knew his choice of Niall would be minimalistic, but he also knew that Niall would add that dance groove that he had used from Chic to the song, and that's exactly what he ended up doing. Really, I think we should just call it at this point and enjoy the rest of the song. Let's go ahead and move to the latter half of the song and try to enjoy some of the solo that Stevie played and just play it on out. Once again, if you guys have questions about this, or if I forgot to cover something that you think is important, go ahead and shoot me an email. And once again, check it out. David Bowie, 1983, Let's Dance, recorded at the Power Station in New York with Nile Rodgers co-producing. Little breakdown there, no bass, right? Another classic Nile technique. Some melodic variation there. Keep the listener interested. You'll also notice that David doesn't have any harmony with his voice, which I find interesting. No harmonies with David. in true 80s fashion, we're going to do a fade out. Thanks again for watching Dave's Waves, and we'll see you next time.